who is the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and leader of the APC in Bayelsa State. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
How did you receive the judgment of the Supreme Court on your request that it review its judgment when you went to court?
I actually thought it was very, very sad. I mean, that day was a very sad day for me because I thought that the Supreme Court should have had the courage to change or to review itself if it has made a decision that is seen to be against the principles of justice. If you have a case in court challenging the authenticity of the certificates of a candidate, that's a different problem. But if you now say you are going to establish forgery and you have not even heard the person concerned, because forgery is criminal. And if it's a criminal procedure, then we know that it shouldn't have come by way of originating summons. It should have come by way of writ of summons, so that people can, at least, you can call witnesses. You haven't gone to the school, to the university where this person went to and the schools that he attended to confirm the veracity of those certificates. And from paper evidence, you condemn such a person. It's really very sad because for me, it's even dangerous in the sense that if, for example, somebody was wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit and condemned to death, and people found that there were things that were wrong with that judgment and that the Supreme Court needed to avert its attention to some of those things that were not correct. I thought the Supreme Court should have the courage to reverse itself. It has happened before.
And those who argue that this is not a matter of life and death, and that the Supreme Court, in the first instance, is a court of review. You've had the initial courts, the court of first instance, the High Court. You've had the Court of Appeal, and then it finally went to the Supreme Court. And so far, there's been some consistency in terms of what we've seen. And then to ask for a review was pushing it.
No, I don't think so. I mean, anybody that says this is not a matter of life and death doesn't really understand the issues. I am today dealing with a deputy governor that is at the verge of committing suicide. Because every day I have to call to be sure that he hasn't done anything to himself. I mean, if you were here and then somebody just says you forged your certificate, you built your life on that integrity, and somebody just, 7 people sit there, 5 people sit there and bring everything down, that can actually lead to suicide. And it's a situation of life and death, really. We're saying, look, and the Supreme Court has done this before. This is not the first time the Supreme Court was being approached to review itself. We're not saying that the Supreme Court erred. We're not saying that. So we're saying that they overlooked certain things. And those things that they overlooked were brought to their attention to say, look, if you say, for example, that you are upholding the judgment of the lower court, then the judgment of the lower court did not disqualify our governorship candidate. So where did the Supreme Court now have this other thing to add to what the judgment of the lower court already held? If you are going to uphold the judgment of the lower court, then okay, you disqualify the deputy governor and then allow the governor to carry on. But by its decision, what the Supreme Court did was, unfortunately, to declare my vote unlawful, for example, and the votes of 300 and something thousand people in Bayelsa unlawful. We are seeing the development of another variant of democracy here. And you see, Nigerians should try and really look at the real issues.
So perhaps indeed, I mean, the people, opinion writers have written on how it was seen they were developing an electoral college of judges. And yes, there's all of that dimension. But then the Supreme Court also looked at its own principle, the fact that it is the final court. In fact, according to them in their judgment which was delivered, and we understand that it was painfully delivered, you know, by the judges themselves. They felt really pained that they were being asked to review their own decisions. They said that no matter of error was pointed out in the case of the APC, asking for review, and you cannot ignore the context. So, for instance, what we saw was that Imo State, the judgment delivered on Imo, did not go down well with the opposition party. They have also sought for a review, which we'll be hearing the results today. And then shortly after, we saw that of Bayelsa, and then later on, we now saw people saying they're going to be asking for a review in Zamfara as well. And then we heard about, oh, there's going to be a review of the presidential judgment. It was saying that there would have been no end, which was one of the things that the Supreme Court justices pointed out, that there would have been no end to litigation. And according to them, there must be an end to litigation. I mean, there's principles that you support.
Well, I definitely support this, but you know, that is in the situation that you have a Supreme Court that has given a judgment that nobody can really fault. I mean, there are principles of justice, very basic principles of justice that we feel were actually negated in the judgment. That's the only problem. That's why we say, look, let us go back to the Supreme Court and avert their minds to it. We didn't say stricto sensu, review your judgment. We are saying, please avert your mind to these issues as well.
But these are issues that are rarely ever heard of. I mean, we're asking the Supreme Court to reverse itself or to review itself on four matters in less than a spate of how many, and all of these matters border on politics?
No, they've done that before. In fact, the lawyer...
In how many matters?
No, the lawyers...
In the history of this country, in how many matters?
Well, if they've done that in a few matters, we felt that this matter definitely qualified. Because a situation where, for example, you just put yourself in the situation of the deputy governor. You are now stigmatized for life as having forged your certificates, and nobody heard you. The principle of fair hearing alone says you must be heard. Nobody has called you. Nobody has called any witnesses. Because there were variants, there were spelling variants in your certificates.
No, not just spelling variants.
No, they were. No, that was it.
There were name variants.
No, name. Okay, look, it was
name variants. In fact, from what we gather, about 5 different names on look, 5 separate certificates.
That is a misinformation that has been put out there that you probably must go into and really understand. Look, okay, on his primary 6 certificate, there is a variant of the same name. The same, but just spelling variants. Look, I come from a place where there are different dialects. And in the different dialect, a name might appear different. But depending on the dialectal area where you are schooling, they will probably spell your name that way and call your name that way. You must have seen my name spelled Timi Priye in newspapers. Timi Priye Sylva, even sometimes. They even add an I to my surname. If there was such spelling, if such a spelling error had found its way on my certificate, I would have probably been done for, according to the Supreme Court. Now, if you have, I mean, which certificate did he forge? If you want to prove forgery, then you must have the original. Now, you say you have variants of the name. You have a variant in this primary C certificate, the GC certificate, and the university certificate. Now, which one is the original? Have you established which one was his name? Which one he forged? Did he forge his primary C certificate, for example? Did he forge his, the secondary school certificate? Did he forge his university certificate? What have you established? And then you say, because there are variants of the name, then you say, oh, that this man has committed forgery. That is not the way to prove forgery. There are very laid down principles to prove forgery. This man did not school in the university outside Nigeria. He schooled in the River State University of Science and Technology. Have we gone there to say he didn't school, to find out whether it was the same person that schooled there? Have we gone to WAEC?
You have said that there's a misinformation out in the information that is out there. So are you saying, because I'm
Even
saying,
the Supreme Court introduced another variant of the name, because they actually misspelled it again.
I want you to tell us which one then it is, because what I'm seeing here are 5 variants. There is Degi Bill Baraga, which we understand
that was on his primary C
1976.
certificate.
There is Adegi Bill Bakumo, which was used in 1984. There is Degi Bill Barakuma.
You see, but can't you see that there is similarity? Something running through the names?
Sir. There is Degi Bill Barakuma
Yes.
Wangaga.
Yes. Which is his middle name.
Pronouncing it well. There is Degi Eremienyo Bill Barakuma.
Let me explain this to you. Look, this man was born Bill Barakuma. You are not even able to pronounce the name because you are not from the area. No, we completely excuse you.
Thank you.
But that is the problem. The problem is that people who wrote the name probably were not from his dialectal area. Let me explain all the variants. There is Bill Barakumo, which is a variant in a different dialect. There is Bill Barakuma, which is a variant in a different dialect. Now, later on, in my tradition, when you become a chief, you take the chieftaincy, you take the name of the chieftaincy. If I go to my village today, people don't call me Sylva. They call me by my chieftaincy. Now, he now became Chief Eremienyo later on. And now added Eremienyo to Degi. Now, when you even say there was an Adegi, Adegi is a common way our people call the names. If any name that starts with a consonant, they tend to add, in the traditional setting, they tend to add an A.
Let me get this straight. Are you saying, I mean, because the governor doesn't have this problem. He's from Bayelsa.
Yeah. I don't have the problem.
You don't have the problem. You're from Bayelsa. And I'm sure that a lot of political aspirants, people who have aspired to political offices, perhaps did not have this problem. Why is his own case unique?
No. You see, if, for example, you see, some people didn't have the opportunity to school where I schooled, for example. They schooled in the village. And, of course, the teachers probably were not as well trained. So, I mean, you cannot say because it didn't happen to me, it didn't happen. Do you know how many other people have the same problem? Is it because it has not come to the public domain? This has come
I'm wondering whether it's a uniquely Bayelsa problem.
No. Well, it can happen to anything. Look, anybody. Look, it happens to me all the time. The newspapers continually misspell my name.
Okay, let's go to Lagos now and take questions from my colleagues.
Well, Honorable Minister, clearly you don't agree with the decisions of the courts, even though they explained why that was the case. But while you were speaking just now, you made reference to another variant of democracy. Could you explain? What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that is that today, the variant of democracy that we are seeing is that I don't have to bother to campaign. If my votes don't count anymore, which is what this judgment really amounts to. If my votes don't count anymore, then what I can do is just wait around and position at the judiciary and wait for any body that is contesting with me. After he wins, I take him to court, and then I get elected by the judges. That's the variant of democracy that I mentioned.
Well, you know, earlier in one of the statements which we read, saying that it was released by you, you did call for calm, even though you said it was provocative, but that everyone should be calm and not take laws into their hands. But listening to you this morning, people will get the impression that the Supreme Court erred in that particular review, the judgment that was given. But we all know that we've seen several judgments that people don't agree with. But insofar as it's been handed down by the courts, whether we like it or not, we need to abide by that. Don't you agree with that principle?
You know, I do agree with that. It's just that this time I have to come to the public domain because there is a lot of misinformation. Somebody, I have on my hand somebody that is contemplating suicide. Somebody that has been criminalized without fair hearing, as far as we are concerned. And if we don't bring this to the public domain for the people to see that there could be something wrong, then I will not be doing service to the deputy governor candidate that has been disqualified. That's why I'm here, because, look, you have a situation where you have proven forgery, and this is, I'm sure, the first time that forgery has been proven at the apex court by way of originating summons. Nobody was heard, no evidence was adduced. You just say by paper evidence, by affidavit evidence, you've been able to prove beyond reasonable doubt, because forgery is supposed to be a criminal offense. But of course, when you have this kind of situation on your hand, you have to come out and correct that impression that we are not talking stricto sensu about forgery here, because there was no forgery at all. There were just variants of the name on the certificate, and the Supreme Court has gone ahead to uphold the judgment of a lower court. And if they have gone ahead to uphold the judgment of a lower court, we are also saying the Supreme Court has introduced extraneous things to that judgment. That judgment said that the deputy governor had been disqualified, but that judgment did not disqualify the governorship candidate. The Supreme Court went ahead and disqualified. Where did that come before them? Because you don't give anything in the court that anybody has not asked for. But in this case, the Supreme Court actually added more to what they had asked for, what existed, and gave them more. So this is a very unique situation. As far as I will not support violence. That's why I went ahead to call for calm. But while calling for calm, we have to make everybody understand that we feel strongly that there were some aspects of this judgment that really cannot stand the test of time.
Okay, Honorable Minister, gratifying to know that you have called for calm, but I don't know how strong that calm is pervading the state in Bayelsa, because we understand from information in public domain that shortly after the nullification of the election of Leon's mandate, political and security observers in the state began to express grave concerns that major ex-commanders of Movement for the Emancipation of Niger Delta, who backed your candidate, the candidate of your party, may be calling out to return to the trenches and begin vandalization of oil facilities. Gratifying to know that you are also Minister of State for Petroleum. Are you aware of this, and is there anything being done to ensure this doesn't happen?
Of course, I'm aware. We are doing everything to ensure that that doesn't happen. Whatever happened initially was spontaneous, and we had to put it under control. And since then, of course, we have reached out to Bayelsans to say, look, everybody must give peace a chance. Because, I mean, in this case, we cannot cut our noses to spite our face. Peace is good for everyone, and that's what we have told everybody. And I think the peace is holding now. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there has been some injustice in Bayelsa. If a candidate that was roundly rejected by the electorate has now been imposed, what we are saying is, okay, if there are, look, the Supreme Court has said different things at different occasions. In the case of Kogi, for example, the Supreme Court said the deputy governor didn't have a part in the votes of the governor. And in the case of Awudu and Faleke, they said the votes were for Awudu, and the deputy governor did not have a part in the votes of the governorship candidate. In the case of Bauchi, they also said, well, go and get another deputy governor and then contest the election. They annulled it. In the case of Adamawa, Boni Haruna was sworn in after Atiku was made vice president, because they said, of course, it was a joint ticket. So we don't know exactly what the Supreme Court is saying now, because they are saying different things at different times. What we are saying is, in this situation, what they what they could have done. Because look, for me, I believe completely in the sanctity of the Supreme Court. I do. But when the Supreme Court, I believe, is beginning to do a few things that even people like me are beginning to see as unfair, then it is my duty to come out and say some of these things. It's important for us to say some of these things so that the Supreme Court can correct itself. Because it's an institution that this country needs. Even if we didn't have a Supreme Court, we should be inventing one now.
If I get you correct, just a moment, pardon me. If you say so that the Supreme Court can correct itself, are you saying on this case or in future cases?
You see, my problem is when you say future cases, I always give the example of somebody that has been condemned to death. Are you going to wait for a future to correct an injury that can be corrected now? If the injury has been pointed out now, why don't we correct it and move on? Because if you say, oh, you are going to take time, because, I mean, even the defense on Wednesday, even the defense accepted that they could be wrong. Because they say wrong or right. So even when the Supreme Court is wrong, it is final. I mean, that is very dangerous for all of us. Even when they are wrong, they are final.
So is your party or the candidates, do they have any move to make in the future regarding this same case? Because it will sound as though you're saying this is not over just yet. The question is, are you planning to make moves that's talking about your party or the candidates involved? Because I get a sense that you're saying this is not over just yet.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Of course, I am putting this now. What we are saying is we are bringing it to the attention of the public that the impression that is being created is not exactly what it is. That's what we are saying.
Are you trying to avoid prosecution? Is that what this is about? Because there are those who have
in fact, we are even calling for You see, what we are saying is, why didn't the Supreme Court say, if there was forgery, why didn't the Supreme Court order for his arrest and his prosecution? We are even the ones calling for prosecution because we want to have fair hearing. That's what we are saying. We are saying, why didn't the Supreme Court say, okay, this guy has committed forgery, that is criminal, the police should arrest him and prosecute him.
Perhaps the police...
But they didn't say that, which is what surprises all of us.
Do they have to say that?
They can't say that.
They can say that, but they don't have to say that.
They don't have to do anything.
If by the implication, and that's what you have also found out, by the implication of their judgment, they have said that this is a forgery. There are those who have said what should immediately follow is that the police authorities should swoop in and pick up the
that doesn't follow. The court can order. And the court has ordered before to say, look, we have found that there is something criminal about this. Go ahead, prosecute.
Wasn't that the implication of that?
No. The court, no. See what? I don't look at implications. I don't like to look at implications because if we're talking of implications, I can also tell you what it implies to me. What it implies to you may be different from what it implies to me. Let's not discuss. Let's not take it to the realm of judiciary.
You're saying, are you calling for prosecution? Is that what you're calling for?
The candidate has already approached the police.
To say?
Yeah, to say, investigate me.
Okay.
He has already approached the police himself. To prove himself, he has approached the police to investigate him. That's what I'm bringing to your attention now. We are actually interested in that. What we are saying is, why didn't you give him fair hearing? If you are to prove forgery of his certificate, you cannot just, without hearing from this gentleman, say he has forged certificate. Well, now, which certificate did he forge? No, I'm asking you, from the evidence before you. Is it the primary C certificate? Or is it the secondary school certificate?
I'm neither the police or the court of law.
Which one is the original? Which one is the forged one?
We have to go at this point, and we have to thank you for sharing your thoughts on what you make of the Supreme Court's judgment on the review, on your request for a review. It would have been interesting to also see what your stance will be when the reports will come out today for the Supreme Court judgment on the other reviews that have been asked. But thank you for sharing your thoughts this morning. Sylva is the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. He's also the leader of the APC in Bayelsa State. Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Please stay with us.